So big data and AI. Hands up who the tech heads in the room are. Who are my tech people, yeah? Awesome, cool. When did we start talking about big data? I can't remember now. Was it like 20 years ago? Yeah. It's still,
I think in loyalty forums like 10 years back. Yeah,
10 years.
We started to think it as a buzzword pretty much.
Buzzword, yeah. We couldn't figure out anymore. We should have stuffed some more buzzwords in the heading, huh? Our SEO is not going to do so well. But at what point have we, well, here's the first question. And maybe I'll allow you to introduce yourself with this question as well, guys, is have we moved from big data and AI being a buzzword? Are we still in the buzzword phase, or are we beyond the buzzword? Peter, maybe introduce yourself and tackle that one.
Yeah, thanks very much. Pleased to be here. For those who don't know me, Piotr Kozlowski. I'm VP Consulting, responsible for loyalty solutions at Comarch. 10 years with the company, so long story. Before that, I was in a consultancy space for airline industry. Attending those conferences for a while, so I remember when we talked a lot about the big data. And whether we moved with that, I think we definitely did, but we completely, I think, got a new understanding of what it really is. Whether it's called big still, well, it's more a matter of volume, but it's still data. But I think we really changed the way we understand what that big data is. I think we all in that room, we were here 7 years back. I mean, we were living under the impression that, I mean, one thing is the data that we collect from our interaction with the consumer, but we were relying a lot on the third-party data, and something that was driving our emotion was really social media. Yeah, we talked about, and big data was what underneath big data, we understood a lot of the unstructured data that we can capture in social media. And we realized today that this is coming to some extent to an end. And we realized that the third-party data is less accessible to us, and we have to rely much more on our own data, our own big data that we generate from our own touchpoints. So, I mean, clearly Facebook and other social media providers have put a limit on how much they can expose. We are entering the era of a pretty much cookie-less world, yeah, which will probably jeopardize the way we do the digital marketing in the future. But what is, I think, good kind of a message for all of us here in the loyalty space here is that the loyalty program's relevance to actually generate data will become even bigger than it was in the past if we are not able to really capture that third-party data. So I think 7 years back, we were living under the impression, okay, we're gonna know everything about the customer, regardless whether it is in our channel, in a third-party channels. We're gonna have this another buzzword, one could say, 360 view of the customer, which was far beyond really our profile of the customer and the collected data. And right now we're moving a lot to understanding, okay, how we can generate a kind of a net data, a data that is truly, on the one hand, shared by the customer because they intend to share it, shared by the customer because they, allowed to share with us, collected at the touch points, and what is the data that we can collect for the third parties, but in a more elegant, I could say maybe civilized way, for the partnerships. That's what we've been doing, guys, here quite a lot. So I think we evolved and we matured the understanding. Whether it still should be called big data, I don't know, you name it, yeah. But we evolved definitely how we collect data into our channels. That was a long introduction. Sorry.
No, it's great. It sets the scene well, Peter. Ed, introduce yourself, and do you agree with Peter? Have we moved post buzzword with big data?
So I'm Ed Brocklebank. I've been working with some marketing and technology since about 1999, I guess, when I first fell in love with, got one of those AOL internet CDs through the post and got on my 28k dial-up and built my first website, which was incredible to be able to do. And then since then, I've kind of been in the role of data analytics director at various digital marketing agencies, and I'm now work at Bloomreach with a commerce experience cloud, and it's about helping you guys create personalized customer journeys and experiences that basically seem like magic. And I think it is a bit of a buzzword still. I think there's this disconnect between what I heard someone describe as the tappity people and the clickety-clickety people, right? The tappity-tappies like coding and writing SQL and very technical, and then the clickety-clickety people like a nice interface, and to actually use that data and do stuff. And for the developers and the technical guys, I don't think big data is a buzzword anymore. They're collecting the data, they're storing it, but it's locked away. It's locked away in a system that you as loyalty experts and you as marketers probably can't get to, or it takes, I think you said, this roadblock of IT, and that's exactly it. They've got all this data, but you've got no way of using it, which is kind of, what's the point in even collecting it? You don't get a point to having the biggest database. So I think for marketers, it is still a bit of a buzzword. And then AI, we're seeing more and more people. AI is such a broad term, like ultimately, it's using maths to do clever statistics to try and predict things about people at its lowest end. We're not talking about AI like Google's doing self-driving cars. You don't need that. So let's just talk about it in the context of clever statistical models, really. Let's forget about AI. So it's about connecting those two sets of people. It's about creating these amazing customer experiences. But to do that, you need to power it with data. And we have this problem because the data is locked away in a room that you as marketers can't get to. So I think the trend is coming up. How do we solve that? How do we take the roadblock out of IT? And I see more and more companies, certainly in the lockdown period, they've had time to reflect and they've had time to think about how they structure their systems architectures in order to allow the marketers to actually get hold of that data and use it. So yeah, is it a buzzword? I think it is still for some people because they haven't been able and given the allowance to get hold of it and use data in a good way.
Interesting. For those wondering why I'm up here, unfortunately, Torsten is unwell, and that's why he's not here. So I'm going to have to bluff my way through understanding the topic in the way that those of you who have heard Torsten speak before. I apologize. There's no infotainment slide presentation, and I'll try to make do and fill those big shoes of Torsten. He doesn't have COVID. The poor bugger just has the regular flu. So I don't know what's worse, but
it's still a regular flu, right?
It's still a regular flu, right? It still exists. Yeah, he's very upset that he's not here to entertain everybody. Hands up, who thinks of themselves as a bit of a tech expert? Or who sees themselves as, hey, I'm the loyalty person, and I don't know, I hear all this data stuff, but somebody else looks after data. And hands up who didn't put their hand up. Hands up if you're still asleep. Okay, all right. So for the non-experts in the room, Ed, we'll start with you on this one. How would you define big data for the non-experts in the room?
I wouldn't call it big data. For me, big data is when you're streaming performance of a jet or aircraft every millisecond back to a base, right? You're not dealing with that kind of data as people sending loyalty programs, right? So we're just talking about data, but we're not talking about the kind of size of data you put into Excel, right? It's a bit bigger than that, but it's not huge volumes of data. So for me, it's about collecting relevant data that is going to allow you to do your jobs, not just collecting absolutely everything about someone that you may not need. You have to collect that data that is relevant to allow you to segment those people, to find out what they're into so that you can deliver the experience that they're after. The more you know about the customer, and from all of those panels we had earlier, the more you know about the customer, the more likely you are to be able to target them with the right message. Some people talked about, you've got two types of traveller, or I think it was three. You've got someone who is still very hesitant, nervous to travel, and you've got people who are willing to go out. And so if you're going to deliver a loyalty campaign to those people, the messaging that you put in, say, an email is going to be different for those types of people. And then you may have to segment it further by one's a leisure traveller, one's a business traveller. And then you've got a further layer, which is which of the 5 loyalty tiers you currently have. So we're already up to 5 times 3 times whatever, right? You've got 30 segmentations there that you have to build, you have to process, you have to use the data, and if you're trying to do that all in Excel, it's not going to work, hence you get the IT roadblocks. So So yeah, what does big data mean? To me, it's about collecting relevant data and also being able to activate it and find and target the people you want to talk to with a relevant message. So it's all got to be streamlined. You've got to have the processes in your companies to be able to do that. You've got to have the systems. You've got to work together with your IT people, no matter how much they annoy you, and to get the job done. And you ideally want a system that helps you to do all that.
So, Peter, you sort of already covered it off. You already said, well, I wouldn't call it big data, I'd just call it data, and you sort of already gave some examples. So I sort of won't make you repeat yourself there, but I'll move to the next question. For a non-expert, how would you define AI? I mean, when I think about AI, in a non-expert, manner, I'm thinking about Siri and Alexa and, Netflix and Amazon coming up with suggestions of what I should buy because I clicked on the wrong picture on the screen, and all of a sudden I'm getting all these suggestions for items that I never want to buy from Amazon or movies that I want to watch, but I clicked into the wrong thing. I mean, that sort of AI that we're encountering on a day-to-day basis, we might not think of it as AI, but it's just like, okay, it's there. How are we defining AI, in your mind, how would you define AI to a loyalty context to a non-expert?
Yeah, so I can imagine that a lot of people sitting here on that audience who are seeing two guys from the supplier side and see the term big data and AI thought, okay, it's going to be all the buzzwords. I think we're taking here an attempt to take it down to the earth a little bit and to redefine it, what it really means for us and how we can practically use that. So similarly, we don't use at Comarch the term that much of an AI. It's more of we're doing the machine learning, which is a subset of the AI. If you think about it like AI, it's a broader term and it goes toward more robotics, a high level of automation. Which sounds a little bit scary or science fiction. So for us, machine learning is simply an ability to process large volumes of data and derive meaningful value out of that, find the right correlations and do it at a scale, do it in an automated manner. So I think the biggest difference between the usage of a machine learning and standard analytics that we do is that, when we do, and we have a data scientist that are working on our data, they are limited about what they already know and they can derive out of data, right? So they are putting a number of queries, but these queries are kind of they should prove a certain hypothesis or they might already have, yeah. So if they are looking at the correlation between, famous topic at Tesco Club Card, correlation between selling coconut milk and the phone cards, yeah, they put a query, what is the correlation between the products? So that's a limitation of what they assume. In the machine learning space, I believe we eliminate that limitation because we open ourselves to actually give the algorithms to tell us where the correlations are. We of course should supervise that process. We are able to interfere with that because there needs to be a human reasoning behind it, right? But essentially, it is an automation of the processing of the data that discovers things that we don't know or we haven't assumed that could exist. Yeah, I'm not sure if we will have a chance to talk later about the not area of the personal market that wasn't a fraud, but I think we've got proven in our case that applicability of the machine learning for detection of frauds, really made a great job for us and our customers in some cases. Because we were not defining what really the fraud is, but we were more opening ourselves to tell us more the algorithm, what are the potential anomalies which we then investigate and we are discovering whether they are fraudulent or not. Yeah. So practically, to summarize maybe that response, it is machine learning has been with us for years. Lots of companies were doing it. It's nothing, to be frank, nothing innovative. The innovation comes from how we are actually using it and why we are able to use it at a larger scale, because it's cheaper. The Laffer curve, right, says that the computing power price comes at the lower cost, and therefore we are able to apply those algorithms at the larger scale.
I can just give a really basic example. Let's say someone lands on your website. It's the first time they've ever been to your website. How do you know if they're a business or a leisure traveler? They sign up to your email list. How do you know? What you do is you look at the behavior of everyone who's a business traveler, and you say, oh, on their first time they came to the website, they looked at this page and they did this thing and they searched this way. And you're just overlaying that sort of learning onto this new person to go, do they fit that mold? If so, yes, we'll predict that they are a business traveler. Right? So it's about using historic data to create predictions for the future. Are they going to churn? Are their bonus loyalty points going to expire? Are they going to take a flight this year? And then if you have that knowledge, the next time they come to your website, you can personalize it because you can change the homepage to be about stuff for business versus leisure. You can predict where they're going to fly to. So you can change imagery to show the town that they're going to go to. Your communications that go out with maybe, obviously they won't have any loyalty points at that point because they're a new person, but when they sign up, maybe that first welcome email could have different content in it because you predicted all this stuff about them that they could do. You're not going to be right every time, but it's better than sending them that generic message to everyone, which maybe has got a picture of a family with kids, which is just not appropriate for them. So it's about using the past to predict the future about people you don't know anything about. That's how I think of machine learning.
When I take those sort of those comments and we think about we think about the program manager's role, and we think about the role of the loyalty department in the organization, and where data fits in. I mean, the gold standard for loyalty really is that loyalty is both a provider of customer data and a user of customer data. We sort of touched on it earlier about in the GDPR world, loyalty enables a permission-based relationship with the customer. Traditionally, back in Tesco Club Card days, loyalty was the mechanism to connect the dots about the customer across all of their touch points. And I think, as we sort of already talked about this morning, that's just going to continue in the future. So loyalty provides customer data into, I guess, the collective in the organization, but loyalty also uses data that comes in from other touch points, other departments, from email open rates and behavior and website behavior. It comes in from other areas. Loyalty doesn't own that data. So in theory, it works great and the gold standard works. Loyalty provides a lot of the customer data in terms of connecting the dots, and other departments feed into that as well. Loyalty is then able to leverage that, use that, and get that 360 view of the customer, and then target the deliverables accordingly. But it doesn't always, I'm going to say it pretty much never works that way. Why doesn't it work? What are the roadblocks? And what can loyalty program managers take away as first steps to try to get the basics right, or to fix those basic issues that they're likely to come across? Who wants to tackle that first? Peter?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of the companies in a space that are doing it, and I think those who are doing it not on the right, but who are enabled to do it, are those who are operating in the e-commerce space like 100%, because that's where they control all the channels. That's where they can really, and they are allowed to track the behavior. So if we take Netflix, I mean, if you watch the film and you broke the film into 10 let's say, phases, that is being recorded, and that reflects also what are being shown later. If you watch a film of a particular category and you stop after 10 minutes, you're gonna get probably most likely a different offer next time. The challenge that we have with the not only loyalty programs, but specifically loyalty programs within the airline ecosystem, is that actually airlines do not have that many touch points with the consumer that they can record at. So our programs are highly transactional. Yeah, we record flown transactions, partner transactions. If we are lucky, and let's say majority of the consumer base that we have pre-pandemic, there were corporate travelers who were booking through the agencies, right? So we couldn't even capture the purchase behavior because it was coming from the agency. Actually, I believe one of the first intention of the frequent flyer program set up back in 70s, 80s was actually to put the frequent flyer number to finally associate an itinerary with an individual, right? It was kind of a bridge. Yeah? So what I believe airlines need to do to be able to generate that additional net data is to create more touch points with the consumer where they can actually, track them, understand their behavior. Of course, those touch points are let's say, most perfect in the digital space. So I believe this ability to generate additional data, collection of additional data from touch points, will be heavily associated also with a shift that airlines are trying to do from selling more and more in the direct e-commerce channels, mobile channel, versus going through the agency. We've got here the agencies, OTAs, Expedia is here. Which is treated more as a frenemy, friend and the enemy to the airlines. But at the end of the day, this shift needs to happen. But even if you sell through the agencies and you don't have that purchasing behavior, I think there's a lot of stuff to be done in the digital space to provide more experiences. I think I've been saying that in a number of conferences for years, that when I open my account with the frequent flyer programs I'm a member of, I feel like I'm opening a bank account statement, really. There is not much of an experience there. It's just transactions, hard to read. I'm a little bit freaky about it, so I understand what is the description of transaction and why I got that many points, because it was the RBD Z or Y, but the normal consumer doesn't get that. So I think, and I'm more leaning toward providing experience content, gamified content, not necessarily games, but gamified content that better visualize my experience in membership. So if that motivates me to spend this additional minute in the channel of an airline, although I haven't transacted through that channel, that increases the probability I'm going to be able to collect more data to see how I'm really engaged with the brand. So, there are a lot of businesses who are going right now for that transformation. Automotive businesses for going for that transformation. If you look at the car manufacturers, historically they've been completely blind. They produced the cars, they were surveying customers, they were doing all the focus groups to get understanding of what car should be produced, but they didn't own a single customer. They didn't know anything about it. It was a dealership who owned the customer at the end of the day. Today, with a digital connected car, they can get straight to the consumer. Yeah. Same thing happens with the retailers. It will be very interesting to see what is the role of the Amazon and other platforms as the intermediaries, where the biggest brands in the world are trying actually to shift the entire traffic to their own channels, because that's where they can collect more data. And of course, there's the economics behind it. Yeah. So, but airlines being the service providers, not being able to register that many touch points with the customer, that's where the challenge comes from. It's still very, very transactional.
Yeah, I agree. So I think the two biggest challenges, I'd say, were holes in your data, especially for you guys, because I'm used to working with retailers where they own the whole journey, whereas you guys have got intermediaries which may not pass the data to you. So holes in the data, but also silos, both in terms of once you even if you were able to collect that data, and again, some of the big retailers are, but they still can't use it because it's locked away and it's only made accessible to the technical people. So you have those silos, but then you also have departmental silos. The fact that you have a loyalty department and a CRM team, and maybe you've got an SEO team and you've got a paid search team. Why are these guys not all communicating? You're all looking at basically trying to do the same thing. You're all trying to get to give a really good experience to the customer, and yet every single one of those departments probably has about 3 different unique systems which is tracking data. So until you can all work together as a team anyway, but also then share all that data and get all that data together, and then you layer on the additional challenge you guys have got in your industry of having holes in the data because you don't see the whole process. That's a challenge. So I really like some of the earlier things people were doing. I can't remember if it was the hotel people or the airline people, but they were focusing more on creating experiences for people during the pandemic, and putting a lot of their effort into that side of things. And obviously, customers like that, but at the same time, it's a way to generate data. We've got a client who, totally different industry to you guys, but they sell products, but they sell it to retailers who then sell it to the customer. So they've got no way of knowing what the customer's up to. All they get is the fact that, this particular retailer wants to order 1,000 more of the products. So what they've done is they've thought, well, how can we build that connection with the end customer? Not cut out the middleman, but help both parties. So they've built an app which they encourage the retailers to give to the customers, and then they provide education so they can monitor what the consumers are doing within the app. They can see what kind of things they're interested in, and then they can drive them back into the retailers to then create the purchase. But that data is flowing straight from the app to the distributors, so the distributors getting all the information, and then they can share it with them. I think the Hertz app is probably a great example. You've got 4 different types of, 4 or 5 different services that you offer, and presumably, hopefully, all of that data about all of them is going into one place. You get a much richer customer profile. But yeah, it's a challenge. You've got, as I said, holes in the data. You've got teams not working together, and you've got antiquated systems that are holding that data anyway, so you can't really do much with it.
It's a challenge. I mean, I think about the clients that I've worked with in recent years, and the program manager I talk to on a regular basis, and I mean everybody has similar challenges. Who owns the data? Your internal departmental silos. But when I say who owns the data, it's even the case of in the panel description we talk about how does this all translate to personalized offers? And again, buzzword we've been talking about for many years now. But there's the issue of who owns the customer. Who's talking to the customer? Is it loyalty talking to the customer? Is it the brand talking to the customer? Is it marketing talking to the customer? And, we sometimes think that, this should all be the same person. But, same person, same department, whatever, same originator. But the reality is we know that depending on how our organization structures are, those could be several different teams, all of which have competing internal goals and KPIs, don't necessarily care for each other. As loyalty managers, we know that half of our effort isn't necessarily convincing our customers to stay or fly with us or rent from us versus our competitors. It's persuading our internal stakeholders that loyalty is valuable and loyalty can actually move the needle and change behavior, because there are a lot of non-believers out there. And if we can't get them aligned, it's very hard to have our goals of actually changing the customer behavior as a goal in the pocket of everybody. So when we face with those challenges, the silos, the who owns the data, shadow IT databases, we've all come across those before, as you guys provided some examples of, this department's collecting this data, this department's collecting that data, and it's not necessarily or shared or even accessible, or even you don't even know it's there half the time. I know some programs, I won't name them, but I know some program managers here struggle with, hey, I need to get a headline changed on the website, because we've got a big, huge global offer going out soon, or we're changing our value prop, and that shouldn't be a big deal.
But it's that mentality changes. It's true that, loyalty has been treated, especially in the airline ecosystem, as a kind of a secondary marketing function. So if you had such a trivial things, you need to change the banner on the main website. Concerning your promo, whatever it is, sign up for a credit card. That was always coming as a secondary request, because all the efforts are always directed on the direct revenue channel, which is the booking engine, and that's 100%, right? But I think it's really changing. So that something I mentioned in the beginning, that inaccessibility of some parts of the third-party data will push all the industries, including the airlines, to focus on that net data, the data that we generate, and loyalty programs just the perfect. We have an example of Sixt here, right? What they're doing, they are just inviting us all to sign up to their program and get the platinum card, yeah? And that is exactly the net data they will generate right now, instead of acquiring us for the ads on Google or something. So I think that really changes, and it seems like the loyalty programs being that very elegant way of collection of data that people accept because they feel they are being rewarded for exchange. It seems like our role as a loyalty industry will actually grow within our organizations, and that silos will be eliminated and going forward. So that's a positive.
So, and when we think about those challenges, and taking on board what Peter just said about the opportunities that are there for loyalty going forward, if again, speaking to an audience of program managers, as the intended audience of the conversation here, what's an ideal collaboration setup, amongst your internal I'm going to say internal stakeholders. Of course, some of them may be from external providers, but realistically, your first-party stakeholders. So I'm thinking loyalty, sales, marketing, analytics, and let's include IT in that. Whether it's the web team or the back-end team or what have you. I mean, can you paint us a picture of what the ideal collaboration is so that, if we've got program managers that are struggling with, I don't even know where to start with implementing better practice to be more efficient?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing would be to have a meeting with those other teams, like get to know them, or at least some sort of weekly meeting to share what you're up to, or come together on collaboration on thinking about the entire customer journey from acquisition all the way to retention, and not thinking in your silos. So whenever you're about to send out a loyalty program, maybe someone's points are about to expire and you want to encourage them to use them, right? That's very focused on retention down here and loyalty, because that's your area. But have you considered how the SEO team could help, or the acquisition team could help you achieve that objective? Normally you don't, because it's silos. So just by getting into a room with them and saying, and maybe educating them a little bit about loyalty and how it works, and saying, hey, look, we're about to run this particular promo, here's our goals, here's our objectives. If you imagine all your campaigns going out, if you knew exactly what the purpose of them all is, and I don't know, have it on we can't go to the offices anymore, but have it on some virtual board where you can look at it and go, the acquisition team's up to this, trying to move this needle right here, our biggest challenge is here. If you know what each department's trying to work on, at least you've then you're starting to get towards working a little bit more collaboratively, certainly people-wise, even if you don't necessarily have the mechanism to bring all the data together at that point. And then in terms of I guess figure out what knowledge do those other teams have that can help you do your jobs. I think that would be a starting point. If we're getting technical, then the IT people are typically the ones who buy the platforms and make the decision-making process. So get involved in those discussions. You may not understand most of it, but you need to have your say when they're choosing what IT system they're about to spend £500,000 on or £1 million on. You need to have a say. You need to get your requirements in there and say, hey, I want to be able to build. Why have we got email opens here? Why have we got website behavior here? And why have we got our loyalty program here? I want to be able to send an email, a personalized email, to everyone who has opened or not opened an email in the last 30 days, has been on the website, searched for this specific thing, as in a gold tier. How is the system you're about to spend £1 million going to help you with that? And so you need to start not kind of blanking data and IT, but working with them and trying to get you right. Because they don't care. They don't care about your use cases, ultimately. They're focused on stability, performance. They're not really focused on the same metrics that you are, so you have to make them aware that the things you care about, essentially, and work with them. I think that's probably the best. It starts with just knowing the right people and talking to them internally. Be my biggest tip.
So let's be honest here. Who considers their ultimate role in loyalty? Your KPI that allows you to keep your job. It's a commercial goal, right? It's all about revenue generation. You need to make more money for the brand, yeah? I mean, ultimately, that's what it comes down to. I mean, we can talk all the niceties that loyalty is about changing behavior, which we know is true. We can say that it's about connecting the dots data-wise, which we know is true. We know that it's about relationships and engagement and all these things, but really they're mechanisms that make the magic of loyalty work. But ultimately, we do this because there's a commercial goal. Yes, is there anyone that disagrees with that statement? This all boils down to a commercial goal. But I have maybe let's say yes, I do agree with it, just to make sure you're actually awake. Okay, all right. So that if we take that assumption as a given, or that assertion as a given, ultimately it's about show me the money, right? And I think we can all probably think of examples where in the modern age today, in 2021, there seem to be clear opportunities lost, missed opportunities in terms of easy data connection that you don't even need machine learning to identify. Although some simple, very basic algorithms that even an organization that doesn't have a slew of data scientists on hand could probably implement. I mean, I think to myself, even pre-pandemic, I was commuting every week. At the time, I was commuting LA to Minneapolis on pretty much a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And often I would fly one airline from LA to Minneapolis, and I would fly another airline, Minneapolis back to LA. on Thursday night or Friday night. Now, there are lots of reasons for that. I'm not going to get into that, particularly for primarily non-US audience, but it worked out, and it was the most reliable way of me getting there on time and getting back in time without being stranded. But to Airline A, they saw me every week flying from LA to Minneapolis. They didn't see me going back, and I didn't use their credit card to book my return flights on Airline B. And Airline B saw the opposite. So if I'm Airline A, I'm thinking that somebody like me should be flagged to be like, why aren't, he's not walking back from Minneapolis to LA every week, especially not in February. How's he getting back? And why aren't we targeting him with some kind of offer or hook to try to win that business? There's obviously a share of wallet problem there. Where's the incentive? Whether it's a promotional offer, and you know what, if it's a high enough value customer, maybe there should be a phone call from the executive team saying, hey, how's it going? And you be honest with the customer. We see you're doing this, what can we do better? I think we can all think of examples like that right now where I am giving you all my data. You know everything about me. Why are you sending me new member enrollment offers? Just some very basic examples there. Any thoughts on, again, sort of easy wins that loyalty teams can perhaps focus on, to try to get some easy wins using data a bit better?
Yeah, the case that you are explaining, it's probably one of the most simple one you can get. So this is just finding the pattern of buying two products here, two segments or two itineraries at once or separate, right? So if you're seeing clearly through the data, and probably if you take an assumption, give me the customer who is buying a one-way trip but we don't see for a week a return one, and is a frequent traveler. I mean, here again, you've got some limitation, right? Because there are lots of different variations. But this is exactly where machine learning comes into the game. Yeah, if we see customer buying certain products, certain itineraries that typically correspond with buying the other, so these are the kind of frequent patterns that we can say. Then you follow up with the question. That's exactly the same story. Sorry for using it again with Test Club Card. If you were buying a coconut milk, you were getting the offer for a phone card because most likely you were from regions where you use in your cuisine the coconut milk. That is kind of a basics, yeah. And definitely the technology is out there to clearly identify that. Yeah, that's the simplest scenario.
So really, we're just talking about segmentation. So instead of just taking I've got my gold members, or my platinum members, or my base members, or I've got my members that haven't had any activity in 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, whatever else. But we're using the same mindset. We're just thinking, how can I segment? But I'm just using a different trigger. I'm thinking outside the box a little bit to identify triggers for either journey-based offers, or even it could be, if your technology is a little challenging, it could be a manual promotion, right? And you just have a series of them scheduled through the year in the most basic sense. I mean, obviously it's not as efficient, but you could do this even if your team is challenged, right? I mean, you just need to work with your analytics team to be able to identify, hey, you know what, we're gonna look for some out-of-the-box segments to promote to.
I think it's not necessarily the use cases, and I might be wrong because I focus more on retail, but I think it's the same. I reckon the audience could come up with the list of 100 use cases they want to do. That's not the challenge. The challenge is trying to execute them.
Yeah.
And what happens is the teams get demoralized because they have to wait a month to get that segmentation back from the IT team. So they're like, well, why? I've got this list of 100 things that I put on the whiteboard a year ago, and I've got one of them done, and it's not even done that well. Why would we keep brainstorming ideas? So you're just going to revert to the default of just doing the standard messaging. So again, it comes down to how can you speed up the process of getting your ideas to market, essentially, and that is about making sure that you're working collaboratively with the people who gatekeep the data and putting the power back into your hands to create those segments on the fly rather than having to wait a month and then get sent a list via email and then having to save on a computer and then go on holiday, and it's a nightmare. So yeah, I don't think it's necessarily the ideas that are the problem, it's the execution that that demoralizes people because they can't get it done fast.
Quick straw poll. We've got a couple of minutes to go. Maybe time for a question, or we'll just maybe take the straw poll to help wrap up here. I mean, who feels that the execution is a roadblock? You know, you've got plenty of ideas. There's a million ways you want to segment your customers and things you want to, you know what you want to do, or at least the path you want to go down, but you're stuck and just, okay. And who thinks it might be the other way around? You need help actually helping. You want to be able to leverage the data more to be able to identify, hey, where should we even be looking? Who feels that's applicable? Only a couple of people. I mean, I appreciate there's some crossover there. If you're able to use the data better, you can do both, right?
Yeah. I think that's the thing. We talk about machine learning and AI, but if you can't even, if it takes you a month to get a really basic segment of, I want to see everyone who has booked a one-way flight from LA to Minneapolis every week and hasn't booked the return journey. It takes you a month to get that data. You don't need machine learning to know that that's a good segment to look at. So forget about all that stuff. You don't need that. What you need is just a tool or a platform that's going to allow you to create that kind of, have the idea, 5 minutes later, find out exactly how many people are in that segment and then act on it. That's what you need, not the big data, machine learning, AI stuff. I mean, it's useful further down the line, of course, but you don't need it right now. You just need to be able to create those segments really quickly and activate them, because getting 5 campaigns out of your new ideas is going to be, even if they're half good ideas, they're going to make you more profit ultimately, and that's
provide more analytics in terms of what works.
Provide more data back, provide more data back about who's engaged with your emails, who's opening them, which is data generation, which creates this loop, and then you're good to go. But if you're only sending a few campaigns a week, or they're very blast campaigns, same message to everyone, you're not getting any anything. You're getting stuff back, but it's not setting you aside from the competition. It's not giving the customer that amazing experience, and it's not giving you data.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, I think that's a really good kind of note to end on, is that, again, buzzword, personalized offers. We've been talking about this for years. We all know it doesn't happen the way it should, whether both as the recipient and as the loyalty manager wanting to send. We're not getting them out there as personalized or as real-time as we'd like, and certainly as consumers, we shake our heads every morning when we open our inbox, right? So just a couple of quick straw polls as we finish up, just because I think this will be interesting. Who's got their sort of program metrics dashboards, in their programs? Everybody's hand should be up, right? Keep your hand up if you're happy with the data that you're getting in your dashboard metrics. Hands up if you're happy but would just prefer them to be more real time. Okay. And who is just like, you know what? My gut is still more accurate than my dashboard because it's so out of date, or it's not telling me what I need to know. Is there anyone who feels that? I see a couple of hands sheepishly going up. Don't want to admit that. I get it, right? I get it. People have been skeptical of data.
Oh, yeah.
Part of the battle, if we think pre-COVID, was convincing people to be more data focused.
Mm-hmm. But it's often wrong.
But it's often wrong, or it's out of date.
Yeah. And we had a client who they're not an aggregator, but they allow you to search for flights and holidays essentially. And all the data was really bad. So they were like, well, we're collecting this massive amount of data, what people are doing on site, but it's not useful to us. And just by going through an exercise of a couple of months of just sitting down when everything was quieter over COVID and really focusing on making the improvements to that data quality, they saw, just from doing that alone, they saw their campaigns have a massive, I think it was about 30% uplift, because the data was just more accurate and relevant, so they didn't actually change any of the messaging. Just the input was better, and so you get better output, right? It's, people don't trust the data. We had another company, before Bloomreach, at my last company, who they're a betting company, and we were there to sort out their analytics system. And they used to send out every week. They'd send out it was about 90 spreadsheets that they were generating with data, and they were like, "This is going to take a 2-year project to revamp this, and we need to track all this stuff." And I was like, "Well, how many of these spreadsheets do people actually look at? Have you actually go and ask the people that you're sending them to if they're useful?" And we did, and it wasn't useful at all. No one actually read them. So, you've got analytics people sometimes they're very, and I count myself in this, we're very quite robotic, and we look at numbers. We don't necessarily know what numbers are useful to you unless we've actually talked to you. So we ended up just having one spreadsheet with a few lines, and that was way more powerful for everyone. And that gets people engaged with data because it doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be spreadsheets. It just needs to be relevant to what you're trying to do, and then it becomes exciting. A database is not exciting. Even I don't get excited by databases, but doing stuff with it, that is exciting.
So just on that, who has analytics teams internal to your loyalty team, or an analytics person or people? You have your analytics function inside of your loyalty team, so you have direct supervision of them. Okay, and who has to work across this departmental silo where the analytics team is a separate team? Maybe they're shared amongst marketing and everybody. Okay, so it's about 50-50. It's definitely a mixed view. Yeah, I mean, I think I know who prefers one versus the other. I get that, but it's a challenge, right? And does anybody have the big pre-COVID when we were in the office? Does everybody have the big LED display above the loyalty desks? That ticks over every time another person enrolls. I didn't think so. Was that a hand up the back? Did I see somebody say yes? They had that. No? All right, nobody has that. I'm not suggesting that that's the most important metric that you should have a ticker for, but hey, let's think about hotels, for example. In the last few years, with member rates and things like that, I mean, it was a sophisticated member enrollment initiative. Enrollment was the goal at all costs. Now, we've got more sophisticated with that, but you could imagine a few years ago if you're sitting in, if you're Mark Weinstein sitting in Hilton Corporate, sorry Heather for, speaking out of turn here, but the truth is that you cared about that. But there's no visibility. Now maybe that number probably was on the dashboard, but clearly from the response here, I think we all know there's a lot more we'd like to do, but even perhaps with the constraints, hopefully maybe there's a few tips and tricks here from the guys that shows us maybe there's still things we can do internal in our teams, even if we can't break down all the internal barriers, overnight. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Peter. I'm sure people will buttonhole you during the break if they have more questions. I appreciate it. Data's often a dry topic. Hopefully we've kept it at the ground level for most people to hopefully be able to relate to it. Lunchtime, guys, because I know we're really only here for the food. We're going to come back in we're going to kick off again at 1:30, talking about bundles of benefits and paid loyalty and subscription and all the rest of it. So go and enjoy lunch. Try to stay awake. And we have a lot more cool stuff this afternoon, so re-energize and we'll get back into it.